Hi there, I'm John Marlar. I'm with the Williamson County Tea Party. My training leads me to teach in churches. The term is apologetics, the defense of the faith. And I immediately connected this to Revelation chapter 13 and the beast 14 and so forth. And I'm sitting there saying, this can't be happening. Where have I been all these years? But when I found out about this and found out that Georgetown had signed up through an organization called the International Council of Local Environmental Initiatives, had signed up, become members of this United Nations organization, it just blew my circuits. And my wife and I sat down one day after I'd done a whole lot of research, and I said, Melinda, we've been asleep at the wheel. And she said, well, where we grew up with the idea that when a man or a woman said something, gave their word, that they were going to do it. And here we had had our politicians put their hand on the Bible and swear to uphold the Constitution and everything like that. And yet here I was finding out, even in our little town of Georgetown, that our city council was signing away our freedoms and our rights to groups called CAMPO. They're called non-government organizations, and basically what it was is every city and county organization in a 3-county organization appoints one member from the city council or for the commissioner's court to be a member on this thing. And then through federal grants, they get to decide what roads we're going to do. Well, I start looking up and I find that we have in excess of 23,000 of these organizations in the state of Texas alone that have never been elected to this office, that are making regulatory and taxpayer funded, maybe not state or city or local, but taxpayer funded expenditures for highways to health organizations and everything. Then I find out that there's a group called Private-Public Partnerships, and their biggest one is the Trans-Texas Corridor and all the roads that are under toll roads. Those are partnerships of the government with right now, a Spanish organization. Did anybody ever vote on that? No. This has all been being done without voter approval. Then as I started doing the research, I found out that you go back, you can go way back if you want to, but if you just go back to 1992, you have an organization that starts up, and it's like the group of the Club of Rome, and that's a group that is a superset of the Bilderberger group. And they come up with the first time you ever hear sustainable development. And basically what they're saying is we needed a scheme, and they actually call it that, in order to perpetuate and promote the ideas of the Club of Rome to run the world's governance. And we can use the environment as our tool to do that. They even declare in one of their writings that mankind is the enemy of the environment and must be removed. I'm sitting there reading all this stuff and I'm thinking, whoa, people need to know about this. So I started doing a small presentation to our own local Tea Party group. Another group found out about it. Well, as I did this, my research continued, and then I found that not only do they have that infiltration of the local city and county and state government, out of the state government, in the 10 amendments that are up for election right now, 2 through 8 are Agenda 21 items. Take the voter out of the picture, give it to a non-elected regulatory body, and let them run with it, and give them a blank check. Well, that's Agenda 21 processes. So I'm going through this whole process of wow, this is amazing. Then I find that the schools have now been invaded with this. Agenda 21, it's under the teaching children how to do sustainable development. Have a complete reversal of our property values. They're even taught that a global citizen is more desirable to the world society than those petty nationalistic organizations. Now, if you take that whole phrase and you superimpose it into 1933, you have the education minister of the Nazi Party saying identically the same thing. This just blew me off. This was the second blow out of my brain. And I'm going along and I'm seeing this, and then I get a notice that there's going to be a smart meter put on my house. Well, I check into this and I find that the smart meters are causing fires, they're causing medical problems, they're causing all kinds of various things. And so I send a letter to our Georgetown utility. It's a municipally owned utility. And I tell them that I do not want this. I am denying them the implied consent to change my meter out. And I get a return letter. I sent this certified mail. Get a return letter. And I'm basically told that it doesn't make any difference what your problems are. You are going to have one of these things. And I said, well, then I inquired about, well, my whole idea of what America is freedom of choice and freedom from a government that is tyrannical in their edicts. They said, it doesn't make any difference what you believe. You must take one of these meters or else you do not get power. Well, the state law doesn't permit them to discontinue my power. But there is a small clause in the PUC that says if there is a continuing problem that is costing them money, they can terminate the service. So they're falling back on that to literally deny me my freedom and my rights. Then, as a final process that came up in just the last 2 months, I find out that in 1833, a Swami and a bunch of mystics got together in Chicago in 1883, and they had the first parliament of the world's religions. Lays dormant after that for 100 years. But in 1993, now we're going simultaneous in this timeline, 1993, the UN takes over that title and has 10,000 people show up of all stripes of religious belief systems, including the Vatican and the National Council of Churches and Native American mystics and so forth. So they have co-opted the religious area too. They are going to have in Barcelona in 2014, they estimate 20,000 people and representing over 1,800 different religious tracts. So they're trying to do what I was pointing out in Revelation 13. You have a one world government and a one world religion forcing their way into a combining of those efforts. And that's Agenda 21. That's by definition what they are. Now, how do I know that this is all part of the package? In 1992, when the Rio conference was being introduced and the President H.W. Bush got in signs on these protocols, he makes the statement that the American people, because of the sacred principles outlined in the United Nations Charter, will be pledging their allegiance henceforth. The subsequent action to that was in Madison, Wisconsin, where the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America is no longer spoken or talked about. There is now the universal allegiance to the world being spoken by the school kids. Simultaneously to that, when they introduced the Agenda 21 and the World Charter, Mikhail Gorbachev was the speaker at the time. And he makes this statement. He says, this ark, and I'll tell you about the ark as we go, this ark represents the new Sermon on the Mount, the new 10 Commandments, and the new covenant for humankind for the rest of the 21st century. He's basically slapping us in the face because what they were carrying in as he was speaking was called the Ark of Hope. carried in by 4 men, sat down in front of him. There are 5 pictures, 4 going around it and 1 on top, that are all pagan pictures of everything. And Gorbachev, as his final comment, says, "Cosmos is my God." And he makes that his final statement. This is what is happening, and what is really scary is I only came across this less than a year ago. I have spoken to probably 20 groups now, several hundred people, and out of the several hundred people, maybe a handful knew about Agenda 21. And what's coming up and what's happening is we're here at a conference for Central Texas Leadership Summit. Everybody has got their hot buttons. The problem that I'm observing is that because of the infiltration and the infection of Agenda 21, even if we elect the best top-notch patriot conservative that is not educated on this process, we are not going to change anything. The erosion of our rights and our privileges are just being slowly eaten away. And in fact, that's what Samuel Adams said. It's not usually through the warlike decimation of a civilization. It is almost always due through the gradual usurpation of our liberties that civilizations fall. And that's what I've observed in all this process. So I am adamantly trying to get all the Tea Party leaders to understand that the baseline for all of our complaints really is Agenda 21. If we could just go on the basis of baselining it, my hope would be that even a city councilman, an ISD person, a county commissioner, a state rep or a state senator, or even our national senator would all be vetted through Agenda 21, opposition to, knowledge of, and clear understanding of their methodologies. If they could have this kind of vetting, then our percolation, everything that we're complaining about up here with Obama and whoever, the percolation of our smaller organizations that are being elected will eventually wash these out. The question always comes up who they are, and it originated with the process that created the United Nations. The United Nations was a collective operation that was brought together by the Bilderbergs, and the Bilderbergs consist of a number of top-notch elitist millionaires, the Rockefellers, for example, a guy by the name of Maurice Strong. There's a number of people that are involved that created this operation. They, in turn, created a superset of their own organization that they called the Club of Rome. Gore is a member of the Club of Rome, for example, and so forth. The Club of Rome wrote a series of books, just a whole list of them. And each one of them progressively got more and more entrenched into sustainable development. And through this process, between the Bilderbergers and the Club of Rome, the United Nations is created in 1945. The charter that they adopted was really a transposition of a whole lot of phrases out of the Soviet Constitution. So it started off right off the bat as being a socialist, elitist organization. If you go back a little bit further than that, you have George Bernard Shaw and the Fabian Socialists that got together, and from that came the Bilderbergers, and from that came the Club of Rome. All of this is coming down the pipeline, and when they get to 1990, they start this, that's when Club of Rome comes up with the first time that you ever use the word sustainable development. And that's where you see Al Gore with his inconvenient lie. The facts that continue to process down is that they continue to use the term sustainable. You can say sustainable development, you can say sustainable environment. The other terms that they love to use is smart growth. Smart growth in Georgetown, for example, if I have a chunk of property and I want to put 100 homes on it. 40% of my property must be deeded over to the city of Georgetown. No remuneration for that property at all. It has to be part of your factored cost. That is set aside for green space. The green space is then belongs to the city and can be done whenever they want to. They don't have to do anything while the houses are being built. They'll allow the builder to put in some plans for like walking lanes and maybe some trees and so forth, additional trees, or maybe a park or whatever. But there's no requirement on the city to do anything. But smart growth requires them to get it. Smart growth and those kind of processes are all basically removing the ownership of the property from the owner. We have in federal levels, we have what is called the Wetlands Project, we have the Wildlands Project, we have the Wilderness Project. Well, all three of these are administered by various government agencies, and these government agencies can come in and literally declare any property to be a wilderness area, or a wetland area, or a wildlands area. And when they do that, you no longer can build on that property without their expressed and contractual arrangement to do so. But you still have to pay taxes on it. A guy by the name of Wayne Hage lived in Taylor and had a 17-year battle with the federal government about his property. He could not put a road on it because they said they had easement rights to that property. Well, he finally won through the Supreme Court and cost millions of dollars to get this win to where he comes up. But he makes a statement when he wins. He says, if you cannot own property, you are property. And this is what Agenda 21 through these processes wants to come about. In 1993, when Clinton took over, he issued an executive order. It was Executive Order 12858. That executive order sounds very innocuous. It's all about renewal of air and everything like that. But one paragraph in the deal says, we are to comply with the protocols of Agenda 21, an international effort to produce sustainable development and so forth. Then the executive order then goes through and lists, and this is the first place that I go to when I want to know what agency I need to deal with. They list literally every department of the federal government, down to the little two-man office that's in the White House that sets up the agendas for cabinet meetings, and ordering them each and every one to obey and implement Agenda 21 protocols. Does the Congress have anything to say about this? No. Did Congress rescind that? Did they have 90 days to rescind any executive order? No. Did W improve it? No. He kept it as is. Then we come into Mr. O, and Mr. O not only reinforces it, he sends out a new memo to all these departments and says you must, but then in July, while the Wiener Gate thing was going on, he creates his own Executive Order 13575 that creates the only, out of the wildlands, wetlands, and wilderness projects, there was some space in the United States that didn't fit into those categories. He creates the Rural Council on Sustainable Development. Now the entire United States is under federal regulatory capability. Okay. The idea that is behind Agenda 21, there's two major underlying things. One is called the biodiversity assessment, and the second one is overpopulation. If I could show you a map, I have it on my computer, I could show you a map of the United States that has it's basically taken from the data of the biodiversity assessment. What you're seeing on this map is 85% of the land mass of the United States is not going to be permitted to have a human footprint on it. The way that they'll do that is through regulations, not through laws, but through regulatory activity, They will have you lose your home. They will have things happen. A perfect example is the floods that happened last winter. The floods last winter, there was a whole, the whole section of the Ohio and so forth was just completely decimated. Now, farmers aren't going to be able to use that property possibly for 2 to 3 years. So FEMA comes in and writes checks, loans out to them, low-cost loans to get them restarted and everything like that. And within a couple of weeks after that, the Corps of Engineers comes in and says, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to waive that loan that we've given you, and you sell us this property. So for about a third of what its true value was before the flood, they have now surrendered their property because they're not going to be able to produce any income for years to come. They have declared that buffer zone property now, that all those millions of acres that they've taken over. When you see the map of the diversity map of the United States, the vast, vast majority of it is yellow and red. Red, you're never going to see a human footprint on it. Yellow, if you get a government authorization, you can go in there. All the little black dots that I could point out to you is where they're going to force the rest of the people to live. And the only way they can do that is through private-public partnerships with real estate people, where all the towns become what they call the beautiful, they call it living and smart cities, and cool cities is another term for it. And what it is the businesses will be on the bottom floor. Everybody else lives in the upper floors. Stack and pack is a term that I've used to describe these things. And that is the whole idea, if you think about it, is exactly what you see in World War II after the Eastern Bloc took over the Germany and the Russias. We went into St. Petersburg, and one of the guys joked about it. Here's the Khrushchev condos. And you look over, and here's 7-story concrete bunkers that will have no air conditioning, no heating, unless they bring it up and put it into the room. They're just concrete cubicles that people are ordered to live in. And they are just as gray and as ghost as you can see for miles and miles and miles. And the tour conductor said, the people that live there are not communist. Well, what do you mean they're not communist? Isn't everybody a communist? Somebody in the bus says, oh no, only 10% of us. So obviously our tour guide was a communist. He said, we're permitted to have, now this is after the fall. The communists still get these rooms. What we're talking about is elitist, and that's what Agenda 21 is saying. We, the elite, United Nations, Club of Rome, whatever, we will tell you how to live. And it goes back to Karl Marx. Karl Marx taught that if everyone worldwide would join the dictatorship of the proletariat, then everyone would have a good, sustainable living. And that's been the goal. But it even goes further back than that. What was the goal of every world dictator in history? World domination. Well, that's what they want here. The problem that they're coming up with is that we have 6.5 billion people living on the earth today. They want to get rid of 5.3 of them. There's got to be a way to do that. Stack and pack them, have just simple things like floods, wipe out a community of 10 million people. Zbigniew Brzezinski is on video. I have it on my computer. Zbigniew Brzezinski was the national security director for Carter. He was Clinton's national security ambassador. He went around the world for him. He has been Obama's national security advisor. And he makes a statement, it's much easier to kill 1 million people than it is to control them. That's the thinking behind this whole process. So the scary thing about it is everything that we hold dear in America, I don't know of any single person in my widest range of acquaintances that hasn't lost a father or a mother, a brother or a sister, a husband or a wife, a son or a daughter, a nephew or a niece that died in defense of our freedoms. And yet these politicals, including Perry and other people, are out there giving away our sovereignty piece by piece. Here's a piece of sovereignty. You've got the right to run our toll roads. We'll use our tax money to build it and then turn it over to you to run it. Where's this come from? There's no constitutional basis for it. There's no enacting legislation for this. It's just something that governments do. And they create these little pockets of everything, and all these pockets are to try to get everybody to turn over their property one way or another. We're seeing it happening over in Bastrop. During the fires, after the fires were over, there's a leadership in energy and environmental development, LEEDs development codes. Never been in operation in the Bastrop Smithville area ever. Now it's being invoked. Now they're putting it into play. And what's that require? If you lost your house, but you still got a good foundation, you have to tear the foundation out. We now need you to be green in every part of the house. So now they're not what they had their insurance for, $200,000. Now their house is now $280,000. Where's the $80,000 coming from? Guess what? I would bank on, I give you a dime to a donut. Somebody's going to go in there and say, here's your FEMA money, but if you want to sell us your property, we'll take you out of it. And you won't have to worry about it anymore.
Do you know who's implementing that in Bastrop? Who is?
The county commissioners are the ones that endorsed LEEDs as their factor.
So basically, Bastrop ought to just fire those
Absolutely.
people. Are they aware of
Yes, they are. I've spoken to the Republican Club, the Republican Women's Club there, and I've spoken to the Tea Party there. And both groups, the second time I went down there, they had a big group come together and hear my presentation, and I think they're getting ready to go in arms against all of them now.
Is LEEDs a federal law, or what is it?
LEEDs isn't anything other than a derivative that's come through the International Council, ICLEI, and the United Nations that has been formulated internationally, and it's a building code that is for sustainable lifestyle.
So what's in this for the elite?
The elite will be the rulers that will make all the decisions, but the predominant, my observation is it goes back to Lenin. Lenin made a comment that all the people that helped bring his regime into power, if you know your history, you know that Russia was, for a short period of time, 9 months, a republic. All the elites decided that Lenin had to take over. So Lenin comes in and he takes over and becomes the dictatorship. And what is his first target? The first target he has to have assassinated en masse is what he calls the useful idiots. The elite of today are predominantly the useful idiots that at some point in time when they've surrendered everything over, the dictator that comes to power, and one of the key things that I found out when I'm a history nut anyway, there hasn't been a dictator, including Julius Caesar, that didn't come into his power through the word change. I'm going to change the society. You have there's 3 terms that the Nazis used in their sales pitch. We are going to be efficient. We're going to be healthy. Well, those are terms that are part of Agenda 21 sustainability. The combination, if you take the school to work program that's going on full bore in Fort Worth, you have a duplicate of the Nazi Ministry of Education program that they had. The desire of the straight to work and the outcomes-based education that is part of the Agenda 21 education is that by the 2nd grade, they want to identify every child in America the title of their job. From that point on, that's all that child is ever going to be permitted, and education is no longer in these processes about facts or knowledge. It's about self-esteem and values. Now, whose values? Certainly not mine. Certainly not America's.
Are you aware of core curriculum and Race to the Top?
Race to the Top and core curriculum and Guilin and the international baccalaureate schools.
Well, you know what got my attention on the, I'm not sure if it was core curriculum or Race to the Top, either one, I'm not quite sure what. They're going to replace the classics in literature with government pamphlets.
Right.
Okay. Are you aware how many states have not signed on to that?
There's very few. The last time I counted, I think there was less than 12 that had not signed in.
I think we're down to about 6, and Texas is one of them.
Yeah, but there are already certain ISDs that have started it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it doesn't.
It's not a state mandated, but there are and international baccalaureate. Guilin is a perfect example. We have a brand new Harmony School of Politics being built under taxpayer funding.
And it's Turkish, isn't it?
It is, and Guilin is identified on the FBI terrorist list as a terrorist.
And he is.
And he's the one who owns this thing.
Are you aware that the Turkish generals that were conservatives have all been arrested or fired?
And guess who funded that? Was Guilin.
Okay.
Guilin funded that whole coup. Soft coup is what he calls it.
Right.
A soft coup where he literally just paid his way to take over that government.
Are you familiar with number 6 on the amendments concerning the textbooks here in Texas?
I'm familiar with most of them, yes.
Okay, well, what I understand is there's a permanent textbook fund where we fund our school books through that fund every year. It looks to me like this progressives are stealing that money right now under number 6, and they've got a cute name for it.
Right.
Are you aware that, you probably aren't, and I'm doing this so that people are understanding, that the last time they did this, they took the permanent school fund, which was the fund that had been set aside by the previous state legislators to fund, let's say, Stephen F. Austin needed a dormitory. Do you know what they did with that money? They took all that money and gave it to the progressive professors to, quote, do research in the state of Texas. So now when Stephen F. Austin needs a dormitory, we have to borrow for it. Instead, we could have paid cash. So that is just 2 examples of our progressive Agenda 21, or whatever you want to call these people. That's just 2 examples of what they've done.
Well, 2 through 8 is our Agenda 21 items. All of them are designed to stop the voters having to be invoked to approve them having a cash slush fund for perpetuity.
Well, we no longer have control of our own independent school boards. I ran for school board. What's very interesting is the state legislators set it up a few years back where the only guy that could be a superintendent had to have an education degree and go through a certain school and get certified. So now the progressives send their guys through. You couldn't get the CEO of a great business to become a school superintendent. And so basically now the guys in charge are all progressives for the most part. The school boards do not have any control anymore.
And they're trying to get even what they do have removed. They want them to be an appointed board rather than an elected board.
That's true. Well, I think, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think, yeah, I think that's it. I think we covered where it came from, where it seems to be heading. I think we filled in some of the gaps, and the Ark of Hope to me is probably the one that just set me on fire.
Right.
When I saw that piece of heresy. And now it's on a world tour. Ark of Hope is on a world tour promoting Mother Gaia religion.
Yeah, I've heard Mother, if you read some of the stuff, they call it Mother Earth now. And
well, now they're using Gaia because it's a more mystical term.